All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, it's another one of our Missing Pieces episodes that takes a look back at a little bit older movie, something that came out before we started piecing it together and we couldn't have possibly covered because we didn't have the show yet at the time. And this is actually a little bit older of a Missing Pieces episode because we recorded this way back in October of 2020, the week of the film's anniversary 4K re-release. It is a little movie called 300 from director Zack Snyder. And joining me, of course, is this podcast's resident Zack Snyder superfan, Chad Clinton Freeman. You guys know Chad, who joins me on all of these kinds of movies and a lot of other episodes too. He's been here since the beginning of the show, and I always love having Chad on. And Zack Snyder is kind of a polarizing figure in the world of film. I like him. He's not my favorite. I'm not anti-Snyder like some people. I enjoy his movies, and as we will get to in the conversation, I found myself really enjoying this one. I, of course, loved it back when it first came out, but I was also, a very excitable, probably drunk at the time, 26-year-old male. So, of course, I liked 300 at the time, and I gotta say, it really held up, though, as an overall film. I loved this movie, and we have a really great time talking about it. So let's get into this thing. But before I do, if you're new to the show, I would like to ask you to please make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. And if you like what we end up talking about here, you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. So let's get into this conversation about 300. All right, so it is October, it's Halloween month, but it seems like it's Christmas for our guest, Chad Clinton Freeman, who I'm going to let talk about his buddy, Zack Snyder, for the next God knows how long. Chad, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing great. I'm very excited about this episode. Hopefully it doesn't run 3 hours long or anything.
Yeah, I may have to have a regular version and a Chad's cut to put on the Patreon or something like that.
Yes, release the Freeman cut, please. I do have a few notes. This is my second favorite Zack Snyder movie. So yeah, I definitely will have a lot to talk about here.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this is going to be fun. And I will say I hadn't seen 300 since the theater. I think I saw it 2 or 3 times in the theater back when it first came out, 2007. And I liked it a lot back then. In my memory, it kind of, I don't want to be like a film snob about this, but it kind of got very corny to me in my memory. Like, oh yeah, 300, roll my eyes a little bit. I really liked it when I rewatched it last week,
Right.
And I'm really glad we're doing this. I'm glad I went back to it and rewatched it. It is a great movie. It is really well done. It's just as visually impressive as it was back then,
Right.
And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun talking about it.
I watch it every year, so
I'm sure you do.
and I own it in just about every release they've done. The original DVD box set that they put out, I have that, and then I've got it in still case. Of course, now it's what HD they just came out with, and I'm sure I'll have to buy that version as well at some point. But
sure.
You actually watched the updated version though, right?
Yep, yeah. I recently got a new TV. It does all the 4K and the HDR and all that crap, and yeah, it looked very cool. The new transfer of it and everything. But before we get into puzzle pieces and all that stuff, were you a fan of the graphic novel before the movie?
Okay, so no, and that was one of the things I wanted to bring up. Is that, I mean, obviously the Frank Miller is a huge influence on Zack Snyder overall, and
Sure.
also specifically with this and the graphic novel. And then there was also the movie, the 300 Spartans from 1962.
Mm.
I honestly was not familiar with either of those things. I was not familiar with this story at all.
Hmm.
I actually, at the time, believe it or not, was not. I mean, this was Snyder's second feature film.
Right.
He really was not on my radar. I did see Dawn of the Dead in the theater, did love it, but still, first time filmmaker didn't really get me pumped to see his second movie.
Sure.
In fact, this film I just happened to go to because I had a free pass to see it. Honestly,
Hmm.
there was a comic shop in Vegas that had this program to where I think it was a couple of times a month they gave out free passes with like posters and things like that. This movie was one of them that I got a free pass for. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to see a free movie.
All right.
It was in IMAX, and so I was just blown away by it. I was
Yeah.
like, wow. It was at that point that I watched the movie that Snyder, became an obsession for me, because I was like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. This is his second movie. His first one's great, but this one is just like, wow.
Right.
That wasn't a fan of any of that before. What I would say is that what this movie really did, it did make me a fan of him as a filmmaker, and then also it really opened up a lot of things for me, because prior to this movie, I was really I guess you would say kind of anti CGI kind of person.
Hmm.
Didn't really like movies that were big with CGI spectacle and things like that.
Right.
So this movie won me over in that regard. It won me over. Also opened my eyes to I guess graphic novel movies, really,
Sure.
because that wasn't really something that I was into. Aside from a few things here and there. So there's definitely a lot of things that this movie did for me personally, that I think it did for a lot of people at the same time.
I think so too.
And
Yeah.
then it opened a lot of doors for what has come since.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to start this conversation off, this Missing Pieces episode, by looking at some of the movies we think might have inspired 300, and then we will look at some of the movies that it might have inspired. So let's start off with your first puzzle piece, looking backwards at movies that may have inspired Zack Snyder with 300.
So I will go with the film that I instantly thought of as I was watching the movie. What this movie did for me was really took me back in one regard to 1981, and that's Clash of the Titans.
Absolutely.
I love that movie as a kid. Saw that movie as a kid at the drive-in, and there was just something about 300 making, basically sword and sandal. Um, Fun.
Right.
That had become sort of something that was more serious, I think.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
like stuffy dramas, like
not necessarily that, but Oscar winners,
yeah,
and we'll get to some of those. But yeah, more of not the fantasy side of things, not the fun side, and that's what Clash of Titans was when I was a kid. Was just a fun movie with monsters and swords and battles and such. And this really, as soon as I saw it, I was, because I was one of those persons that said no, never remake Clash of the Titans.
right.
I saw this movie and I said, okay, You can do Clash of the Titans. Let Zack Snyder do it. Of course, he didn't end up doing it, but they did do
They
one,
sure
and
did.
I was happy with it. So
Well, yeah, Clash of the Titans is definitely on my list as well. That definitely like taking those classic stories and just making them big and exciting and fun and
hmm
just fantastical, and just they're just
right,
the classic adventures. And I think that it's definitely a huge influence over this. And
right.
you know what? I'm just gonna just jump right on with my first piece, which I think kind
Okay.
of goes right along with Clash of the Titans, which is, and this is not a movie. Well, I've got plenty of movies to talk about as well, but I don't know if you remember this. For me, these were huge growing up, but these coffee table books filled with these like heavily stylized pictures of like Greek and Roman like gods and warriors and stuff like that. You remember those kinds
Mm.
of books that you would like see at the
Yes.
library and stuff?
Yeah.
That's the thing that this movie, when it first came out, like immediately reminded me of, because I used to love those books. I used to check those out, and then also like the dinosaur ones and like the ones with pictures of the universe and stuff. But I used to love those kind of books. Like I was the kid that didn't read any books because I was not a big reader, but I sure love looking at the pictures. And going through those big, like, awesome paintings of like the warriors and stuff like that,
Right.
and then they'd be like fighting, who knows what, like monsters and stuff like that. That is what this movie reminded me of when it first came out, and it was like, oh wow, this is like those books brought to life.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that yeah, it's very like I was saying, brings the that whole fantasy element to life. And yeah, as far as like images, I mean really, not knowing the graphic novel beforehand,
Hmm.
you can totally just see how it is a graphic novel come to life.
Sure.
And any sort of fantastic art of, you know, uh, ancient, Greek or
Mythology.
whatever, any of that from, many, many years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, totally. I realized that Snyder had this capability to do was to really just put you into the world that he wants to put you in,
Right.
which is pretty much his world. His imagination, I think, is what he's putting you into.
Sure.
Where you get his slow motion, and one of the things I noticed when rewatching this film is how much it contrasts, because everybody remembers how big and bold this movie is, but this movie gets so quiet at times,
Yeah.
and then it explodes, and I love that, the way that and I remember Watchmen does the same thing. Everybody always remembers that it's big and loud, but really he plays with the contrast of loudness.
Yeah, you get
So
a lot of these warriors like bonding and being, you like getting to know them and their friendship and all that kind of stuff. It's really not just nonstop battles or anything.
right,
Yeah.
right. Even though it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you got for
Well,
your next piece?
so the next one, and it goes along with what we're saying. It goes along great with Clash of Titans, and that's Excalibur, also 1981. Now, the difference between Excalibur and Clash of Titans is that Clash of Titans was a PG film. I think I think it did have, or at least I remember as a kid, there was a nude scene. But Excalibur was the adult side. It was the adult version. It was a movie where this world of swords, of course, in it's knights, it's it's King Arthur, so it's a little bit different, but it's still in the world of swords and fighting,
Sure.
and it was geared toward adults. It was R-rated, nudity, um, uh, very sexy and sensual, and that is what Zack Snyder did with that. He brought the fun, I feel, of like Clash of Titans, but then he also has that adult side,
Right.
because this was a hard R movie, lots of nudity, lots of sexuality, homoeroticism, and a graphic, brutal violence. So I mean, it again, that was one of the things, is that he was able to create this movie and say, hey, this is for adults, but it doesn't have to be, snooty at all. It
Mm-hmm.
can just be fun. And that's just one of the great things, I think, about why I love it, is just that it's just unapologetic. It's
Sure.
just, this is what it is, and it's okay for adults uh, to like comic books and graphic novels, and like swords,
Right.
and it's just, kind of all in your face.
I wonder if I've ever seen Excalibur. I must have back in the day. It sounds awesome.
Excalibur, I was not allowed to see at the time. I remember, because it was R.
Sure.
I do remember my parents watching it, and I was not allowed. I did see it later, and I actually rewatched it probably about a year ago or so. It is a great movie, and from what I understand, it's a film that definitely Zack Snyder holds very high. In
Sure.
fact, in Batman v Superman, that is the film the that is on the billboard when the
Oh,
Waynes are walking out of the theater. So
nice, nice.
yeah.
That's a cool connection. Well, I'll go with another piece here, and this is probably one of the ones that you were hinting at earlier with your
Ah,
first piece, but that is Ridley Scott's Oscar-winning Gladiator,
yes. Yes.
which of course swapped Greece for Rome. But I mean, come on, Gerard Butler's Leonidas is absolutely
Right.
absolutely inspired by
Right.
Russell Crowe's Maximus, and there's
Right.
just no question there. And I love Gladiator. I think it's
Oh yeah, me too.
yeah, it's one of the just ultimate of that. It belongs in that legacy of the big, sand and sandals, giant
Right.
epic type movies, and it really solidified itself, I think, with the performance. The score is also another thing that I think is influenced by that classic score there. And yeah, just a lot of the action and all of that. And of course, we get into more magical elements with 300 than there was of anything like that in Gladiator. But just the setting and everything, though, definitely sets it up in a
Right.
similar way.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, Gladiator is definitely a wonderful movie. I do love Gladiator. Like you said, Leonidas is very much a lot like that character. These bigger than life, really. When he opens his mouth, everybody listens,
Right, right.
that sort of thing. And I would say also with Gladiator, there are pieces of Gladiator, the look of Gladiator, this golden look
Hmm.
that Gladiator gives, that I think 300 also has in a lot of times of the movie, especially early on in the film, before they actually, well, between when he's an adult and before they go to battle. I would say there's this kind of golden kind of look that we get, and there are moments in other places that I think was the palette of Gladiator,
Sure.
and I'm sure that some of the cinematography definitely is pulling from that film.
Absolutely.
Um, along with Gladiator, though, I'll go ahead and jump into my next puzzle piece, is
Okay.
because I the same one of these movies, and yeah, what I'm talking about, and these are all both great, fantastic movies, and that's Mel Gibson's Braveheart.
Hmm.
Again, another character, bigger, huge than life. I think these movies need that focal point, especially when it's a movie where it's big battles, you need that one character who is calling the shots that everybody goes along with. And I think the Leonidas character is sort of, in a way, he's almost a caricature of those two guys,
Hmm.
but at the same time, Gerard Butler, I think he's just so good that he is able to pull it off that it does not come off corny. But then what happened? Because you were talking about this earlier with how you remember, just thinking back about this, is I think everything that followed with memes and social media and just the influence that this film had, it gives you sort of that corny thinking back to it. But
Right.
then when you actually watch it, you remember how it actually is,
Right.
and it doesn't at all come off corny.
Yeah, I mean, especially some of the worst moments in film parodies have been based on 300, and that stuff really kind of drags it down a little bit.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, he offers so many, like almost everything out of his mouth really is like uh, been quoted,
Oh yeah.
or is a meme, and I'm just like, wow, I mean, really. But in the context of the movie, it all works so well, and some of it is funny,
Hmm.
like the bit about when they rain the arrows, we'll fight in the shade,
Sure.
and then some of it is just like really, really. I mean, the whole madness. This is Sparta. That scene. I mean, that is just like so iconic and so fantastic, so powerful, and regardless of how many times it's been memed or parodied or what have you, to me that moment is still just it works.
It's epic. It's absolutely epic.
Yeah, exactly. Epic.
Yeah.
Epic's the perfect word for this film.
Well, I'm gonna move on from Braveheart to a couple more Mel Gibson movies with 2004's The Passion of the Christ and 2006's Apocalypto, which
Nice.
both of which, not as heavily stylized as 300, but still bring you into this, this ancient moment in history
Right.
and really like get you in there with this visceral, gritty, and really like ultra violent look at what things were like at that moment in time. And
Right.
that's just something that Mel Gibson loves to do in the films he directs, I guess.
Right.
And again, this is much more stylized. It's obviously based on a graphic novel, like that kind of pops off the screen, the fact that it's based on something comic based, but at the same time it is taking you into this other world, basically, and this other moment in time, and doing so, like I said, such a visceral, real way.
And yes, I totally agree with you there. I would say, as far as filmmakers, Mel Gibson, well, actually, not just filmmakers, I would say as actor as well, has a big part as far as inspiration on 300. I mean, it to me totally, it taps into that same thing that he does with his films,
Mhm.
and Gerard Butler does that same thing with his performance. He taps into. I mean, this totally could have been a movie. It came out years earlier that Mel Gibson had directed and starred in. I
Sure.
mean, I totally see that. But yeah, no, I had actually thought about, I didn't think of Passion of the Christ, but that is definitely a good point there, of really giving you this world that's long since passed by,
Right.
and really showing you this brutality of it. I did think of Apocalypto a little bit, but
Hmm.
I remember, I was trying to think of movies uh, that were like a team of people, and that one's more of if I remember right, it's mostly, isn't he mostly on his own throughout the whole thing, his
Yeah,
journey?
I believe so.
But at the same time, what I will say is that the way that movie is basically, it's not really a story per se. It's pretty much like one long action scene. It's kind of like action after action after action.
Sure.
And that's really what 300 is. There are things that are going on, but at the same time, this really is just, it's not a story driven film.
Right.
It's not plot driven. It's action driven. It's visually driven. And I was definitely trying to think of movies along that line
Mm-hmm.
of action driven and not plot driven. So I think that does work.
Yeah.
I might as well jump into this because it's funny. I wrote down, and I'll explain why.
Oh
I
boy.
wrote down actually the Mad Max films
Okay.
on my list. So the 70. I'm talking about the 79, the 81, the 85 Mad Max films.
Sure.
The reason is 300 feels like a video game come to life in many ways.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot of the action is so stylized, it just seems like a video game. And I was trying to think again, like I said, about movies that were not plot driven, that were more of just action driven, especially ones that maybe are around one particular action. And the one that really popped up was Road Warrior, which I mean, it's basically a chase.
Right. Right.
It's basically what it is. So I thought that worked, but then I started thinking about the other ones, though. I mean, the original Mad Max. I mean, it's a simple revenge movie, and it's very much a series of chases. So
Oh yeah.
they're very much video games if you think about it. It's almost as if they were part of the culture that helped influence video games.
Right.
And then you've got 300 that feels like it is a product of video games.
Oh yeah.
Because you've got not like Clash of the Titans, where you do have some of that early on, where he kind of is going on a quest, going here to see this magical, you know, he goes to see the siren. So you've got this that kind of feels like Clash of Titans there, but then once you get on the move, they fight this squad of people, they fight this monster, this thing attacks. You've got this series of bad guys that they're fighting,
Mm-hmm.
which feels very a video game. It just feels like it's like, okay, we cleared this level.
Now let's throw in the monsters.
Yeah, they take a break, and then it's like, okay, and now here are the more immortals, and then they take a break. So it's very much video game feeling in that regard.
Definitely.
And so just like I said, I mean, Mad Max, I felt like what the best I could think of was it seemed like Mad Max helped in a lot of ways influence video games, and this one felt influenced by video games.
Well, spoiler alert for later in the conversation, but it is funny how some of these movies we're talking about influenced 300, and then future installments in the series might have been influenced by 300. We'll see what happens later on in the conversation.
Right.
But speaking of video games, my next piece is a video game,
Nice.
which is 2005's God of War on PlayStation 2, which that had just come out, and honestly, it's one of the best games ever. And the series has hit or miss as it continues on with some of the future installments of it. But that first one was just so impressive visually, and also like I said earlier in the conversation about how I used to love those like books of like the ancient Greek gods and all that stuff and all the mythology. It really like reignited that excitement for that kind of stuff, because that game really brought that stuff to life in such an awesome, fun way. And 300 comes along 2 years later and just continues that whole thing. Was really, really just fun and exciting at the time to like dig into all this mythology. And the God of War series like kind of played with drawing from different mythologies, Greek, Roman, and other cultures as well. But definitely a lot of that Greek stuff was in there as well. And so, yeah, definitely the God of War video game, that first one, was such a major moment for gamers at the time. And like you were saying there with your last piece, video games seem to be part of what this movie kind of was born out of.
Yeah, exactly. God of War. I've never played that game. I specifically know the visuals and the looks and the feel of that game.
Right.
And that's one of those movies that from time to time they keep saying they're gonna make a movie out of, and I'm like, yes, make a movie out of that because it just
Yeah.
looks like the kind of movie that I'm gonna want to see. Because I'm not a gamer, but I definitely like the look of certain games, and I think
You like
I
nerdy
don't
stuff,
know.
and it's okay to say that.
Well, I mean, I think there's been so many bad though movies actually based off of video games that a lot of people are like kind of against them
Oh
when they even
yeah,
hear about it. But not me. I mean, I'm always willing to give them a try.
that's
So
right.
I say
Absolutely.
bring God of War on.
Well, I only got one more for the inspired by. What do you have?
Well, carry on with what we're talking about here. I'm going to go with Game of Death, 1978, the Bruce Lee movie.
Okay.
It's another one of those that this one, in a lot of ways, feels like with what I was just talking about, with how you go and you fight this bad guy and then you uh, go to the next bad guy.
Sure,
I
sure.
think Game of Death was a big influence on video games in that way. And I think it's a film that, even though it's not a great film because, it was an incomplete film when Bruce Lee died, and then they finished it without him.
Right.
It definitely has its issues once it gets to the part to where he is into the game. It's so damn good though, the action, and that's just one of those though that popped in my head, and thinking about movies that possibly influence games. Also, I'll go ahead and just throw this one in, and this one's maybe a little silly, but when I was a kid, I loved it. Me and my brother, we loved this movie. We saw it at the theater. Megaforce, the 1982 movie.
I don't know if I ever saw this, but I remember the poster though.
So Megaforce is a made up world basically. It's two countries you've never heard of, and you've got a army of specialists on motorcycles that fly, and they have a task to go, save the princess or whatever. And there's a big battle, and big motorcycle stunts and action. So very very much a video game precursor type movie. um, and like I said, I loved it as a kid. I own it on DVD. I rewatched it a couple of years ago. It's fabulous. It really is.
I,
I
I wonder if they I
remember
wonder if they've ever done a "How did this get made" episode on this, because it looks. I'm looking at the poster and some stills from the movie, and it looks just amazing.
Well, a former stuntman turned filmmaker made the movie. I remember when it came out, the critics hated it. They gave it like really really bad reviews. Me and my brother were so upset when we were a kid. We loved this movie. But yeah, Megaforce.
That's awesome. Well, I'll go with my last one, which I think is a pretty obvious one from just a couple of years before 300 came out. 2005's Robert Rodriguez directed adaptation of a Frank Miller graphic novel, Sin City.
Yes.
which I think really, proved that something this over the top stylized could work on the big screen. I can't think of many movies other than these two that have done it so successfully. And,
Yeah, that's the key, successfully.
yeah, exactly. And there's others that have tried it, and I mean, really, Scott Pilgrim versus the World a few years later was the only other one that I think that really does it as successfully. But yeah, that came first, and also being Frank Miller, it has to be mentioned as an inspiration. It had to be like in the ether for Zack Snyder as he was developing 300 into a movie.
Definitely. I mean, I had that on my list as well.
Hmm.
Sin City. Here's what I will say is that at the time I was a huge Robert Rodriguez fan.
Hmm.
I was totally unimpressed and disappointed with Sin City.
Ooh,
I was very much just. I felt like I got punched in the gut watching that movie. I
wow.
was so let down. Yes, no, I do not like that movie. I am not a fan of that movie. So again, that was part of going into 300 of me just not really, because I was like, yeah, it's another Sin City movie, and so that's really what it had a lot going against it when I went into this film, and it
Mm.
was able to win me over.
I went in like, hell yeah, another Sin City movie.
What I would say is that both of these films, the biggest thing though that they were able to do was show what could be done with CGI of throw people in front of a green screen and the magic that you can see. I mean, of course, Star Wars, the prequels tried this and I didn't think was as successful in convincingly creating the world,
To say the least.
yeah, and I think that these were able to successfully do it, and then so much of CGI has become the norm with like every movie,
Oh
and
yeah.
most people don't even know this, but I mean, movies that you would not even think they're CGI, there's CGI going on
Yeah,
there.
it's insane. Like you watch those behind the scenes things and it's like nothing is real in these movies.
Yeah, no, it's definitely crazy, but like I said, I was kind of against it, and this movie did definitely won me over. Um, you had said that was your last puzzle piece.
Yes.
I do have a handful of
I'm sure
puzzle
I'm sure
pieces.
you do. Just
Uh,
rattle them off for us.
well, definitely one of the things that we kind of touched on music, but because you had mentioned music in a way, kind of akin to
Gladiator score.
Gladiator.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say, though, music wise, is that I think also it took note of A Knight's Tale, the 2001 film, which
Okay.
A Knight's Tale took and threw, rock music into, a movie with knights and
Sure,
swords,
sure.
and that worked. And then, Tyler Bates, he was able to really, to me, I fantastic score on this. The way he integrates, like the classic, whatever, ancient. I don't know what you call that kind of music with
Sure.
the
Just epic
it's always the
orchestral.
woman like in the background, the drums and all of that stuff, and
Sure.
then also weave that into hard hitting like heavy metal rock.
Yeah.
A Knight's Tale definitely in that regard. Well, The Crow, because The Crow was for me the movie when it came to anything based on comic books, graphic novels.
Mm.
I honestly did not like um, comic book movies. I would say never was into comic books. Always loved The Crow. Thought The Crow was such a beautiful, dark world. Really puts you into that world. Zack Snyder was able to do that same thing with 300, and it actually was successful.
Right.
It wasn't like you saw a bunch of films after that got greenlit and happened. The Crow, though, I think was a big influence as far as this film.
I think The Crow is an interesting one to bring up because it's definitely comes from a place of these movies that if you didn't know, you'd never know that it was based on a comic. Like that is not like immediately obvious that the Crow was a comic book character, and neither is 300.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what you said you have a bunch more?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with the Stanley Kubrick 1960 Spartacus movie.
Okay.
It's one of the classics as far as serious sword and sandal movies.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that one. As far as on the fun side of the sword and sandal, I would go with Jason and the Argonauts.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Ray Harryhausen, who did the Clash of the Titans effects. He did a bunch of films with the effects, but the Jason and the Argonauts, one of the classic ones of fun.
Sure.
And again, somehow Snyder was able to take Spartacus and Jason and the Argonauts and kind of blend them, I feel like.
Definitely.
And I will go with The Alamo, the John Wayne produced and directed 1960 film, because The Alamo is actually what I thought of when I saw 300. It's pretty much the same story of a small group of people going up against the really big, huge army, where you've got the one team that's just fighting because it's the right thing, whereas you've got the other group that's more of the spoiled and entitled, and this smaller team of people is actually able to do damage to um, that big army, and then that is like a spiritual victory that then leads to greater things to come and becomes like a battle cry. So the Alamo, I always loved. I haven't seen that movie in forever. It used to always come on TV when I was little, and I would always watch it. And I don't know if the Alamo is as big a deal because I did grow up in Texas as it was growing up in Texas, but for me, that was the story that came to mind for me instantly.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that definitely works.
3 more real quick.
Okay.
I was going to say Return of the Jedi, because Return of the Jedi, again, same sort of thing of you've got the bad guys with all the technology, with everything, and then you've got, the little guys in Return of the Jedi. It really is little guys. It's Ewoks with rocks and sticks. Almost the David and Goliath kind of story, which I'm always a fan of that sort of thing. And I would go with Batman Begins, because Batman Begins, I think, also was important because it started to take comic book movies in a new direction in 2005.
Oh yeah, that was before this, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I would have thought it was after. That's crazy.
So Batman Begins is part of like 300 of getting us to where we are now with comic book movies.
Sure.
Of doing things more for adults.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking this is for kids.
Exactly.
The last one I want to mention is just He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, 1983, the cartoon, not the movie. So just the fact that He-Man was so cut, and like here all of a sudden you got 300 of these guys that look like He-Man. But and I would also say that this movie really opened up the talks for a new He-Man Masters of the Universe movie. Of course, they keep saying we're going to get one every few years, and it was in production, supposed to come out last year, this year, and they still haven't shot anything.
It's never going to happen, Chad. But to that piece though, be honest with me. When you were walking back to the car after you saw 300 for the first time, were you thinking to yourself, "I got to go to the gym"? I know I was. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it definitely can inspire, having to work out and
Oh
get
yeah.
better fit. Yeah.
Although of course
I
this
mean,
is
even
all CGI anyway.
Gerard Butler's in such great shape here, and I mean, you see him now, like since then, it's like I wonder if he's like, oh.
That's called being normal. That's all. Yeah, a normal person. But all right, let's move on to talking about the movies that 300 inspired. I mean, we kind of hinted at a few of them along
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way, but there's going to be a bunch of interesting things to talk about looking forward. And this, of course, like we said, came out in 2007, so it's been 13 years since then, and I do think it
Hmm.
was heavily influential on action movies in that first
Right.
five
Oh yeah,
five 10 years after this.
yeah.
Like it was just so readily apparent. But what do you got for your first one?
I'm gonna go with Gods of Egypt,
Sure.
the 2016 film. Alex Proyas, who directed The Crow, so there's
There you
that
go.
come back around with the loop. But I mean, totally Gods of Egypt because it's one of these worlds where it's basically all CGI and it's Gerard Butler. So,
Hmm.
and I of course love Gods of Egypt as well. But would we get a Gods of Egypt without 300? I don't think so.
I think you're 100% right on that one. And if I'm not sure, I don't really remember that movie too well. That one might fit into my first puzzle piece. You'll have to remind me if it fits. But every movie with a giant army that came after this movie with a giant CGI army of like tens of thousands of people, and they all look the same as they're marching forward, which was done absolutely to death in the years following 300. And not done as well, I must say. I will throw one example of that just to drive Chad a little bit crazy here, and that is Avengers Endgame, the final Avengers movie, which
No, I did think of Endgame. I
yeah,
did.
it had to be mentioned. But yeah,
Oh,
just that big overly stylized action battle scene where there's just like a sea of people coming forward, and
right.
how are our heroes going to stand up to all these people? Well, CGI and it's an action movie, so of course they can. But yeah, that is just something that's been done so many times in the years following this.
Right. Well, what was so great though with 300 in those action scenes though is that how you did have this huge battle, and then like a video game, it
Hmm.
zooms you in like on one specific a person, you know, and a lot of times the camera will do like a rotate around,
Yeah.
and there's some slow motion and a head chops off or whatever. Such stylized and so great. Whereas yeah, so the olden days, these films like Spartacus, or any of the other ones you can think of where there were big battles, you didn't get that sort of intimacy with zooming in and actually getting in and on the action like
Yeah,
that.
they're now we're
So
able to use the technology to like really just do anything the director can
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, no, definitely.
So what do you got next?
I'm going with another. This is a very very obvious one. And and something I very much love though, the TV show Spartacus,
Mm.
which came out in 2010. Spartacus, it completely does the 300 where it's in front of a green screen, and it tells the story of Spartacus, which even though they've had this TV show, which is actually my favorite TV show of all time, I'm still on board for them doing a new Spartacus movie.
Sure, sure. I maybe it'll be good if they do another one. But yeah, I know you've talked really highly of that TV show. I never did see it, but it looks good for sure.
It's very much 300 inspired from the sexuality of it, the nudity of it, the slow motion, the
Hmm.
way it looks, the CGI, the action. I mean, it's pretty much a 300 TV show. It really is.
So I'll go for my next piece, continuing along with Gods, Gods of Egypt, another movie that like fits in with that, and also is another one of these ones that I kind of hinted at that future installments or remakes would be
Hmm.
included. But Clash of the Titans remake with Sam
Yes,
Worthington, which
yes,
I mean is again, it's got your sea of of warriors, I believe, was in it, and then also the increasing, bad guys that are like increasingly more monstrous
right.
and video game like as it goes along, and that I feel like the Clash of the Titan movies, these remakes that they made, as not great as they are, I feel like they kind of dominated a lot of the conversation in those that decade after 300. Like they were like these big huge movies.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that the Clash of the Titans remake is great. The second one might not be as good, but the remake's great.
Yeah,
I think it did take a lot of cues from 300, especially the way Leonidas was and the way he spoke, and that's where we get, release the Kraken,
sure.
I think, which again becomes a part of so much afterwards. But yeah, no, I love Clash of the Titans, and I think also what it learned from 300 was, because when you watch the original Clash of the Titans, it is more geared toward kids, and it is silly, and you've got the robotic owl, and they realize, hey, we don't have to do that. They play it more of middle ground for families, instead of going the hard R that 300 does. But at the same time, it's, I would say, aimed for adults. It's not aimed for kids.
Right.
And I think that was a huge thing that 300 did, is really said, hey, we can aim a movie at adults that is action, that is video game, that is music video, that is stylized, that
Right.
is, comic book.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what do you got
I would
next?
say along that, I could just rattle off a couple though that along the same lines of the Clash of the Titans,
Sure.
that came afterwards that definitely were inspired. And Immortals, the 2011 with Henry Cavill, which was a great disappointment.
Yeah, not
I
very good.
I thought so though from the trailers. I was like, this is a 300 ripoff. Uh, Not a fan of that one. 10,000 BC, which I am a fan of, the 2008 Roland Emmerich film.
Sure.
To me, that one, I think owes a lot to 300, also to uh, Apocalypto. But the other one, Pathfinder, the 2007 Marcus Nispel film, which is kind of like First Blood thrown into this kind of world.
Hmm.
Hercules in 2014, Conan the Barbarian in 2011, The Eagle 2011. There was a wave of these films,
Yeah.
that really followed. That I think 300 really helped kick the door down for sword and sandal films.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's absolutely fair to say that all of those are inspired by 300, definitely. So I'll go with something else here. Another one we hinted at earlier, Mad Max Fury Road, continuing
Mm,
from your
right, right.
original Mad Max trilogy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just the ultra stylized, totally over the top, insane action sequences. The score again that mixes that classic epic score with heavy metal riffs and stuff like that. And I haven't seen Fury Road in a while, but I believe there was slow mo in it, wasn't there?
I would think so.
Yeah, probably. Seems like it.
Only thing that Fury Road needs is it needs Max to be more Leonidas like.
Hmm.
That's my complaint.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and not only that, it also has that whole Return of the Jedi element of this smaller group of people against the big baddie, and which is also, the whole 300 thing.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, definitely. I love it when you can see the loop of here's what came before, here's what came after, and
Right.
so many of these are looping back around.
Yeah,
But
definitely. What do you got next?
I'm gonna throw one out there that a lot of people are probably not gonna agree with me on, and they're gonna say I'm crazy. But
Okay.
I'm gonna say Avatar, 2009 Avatar.
Okay.
It's a CGI world. Cameron may have been working on that way before 300 was greenlit. I don't care. um, I think that again, I think important things that 300 did though was to make money with this totally immersive CGI world,
hmm
and I think that without that, I don't know what Avatar would have been necessarily, or had we got that Avatar that we did get.
Right.
But I'm putting it as one that influenced it.
No, I get it. Absolutely. I mean, nothing had been like obviously, like we said, like CGI has really been just a major part of Hollywood and movies, even in ways we don't even know for so long, even before. But to have the whole entire world that these people are occupying be CGI, that was new. And Avatar definitely picks it up and runs with it to the next step from there.
Definitely.
So, okay, I'm gonna go with another one, which I would imagine is probably on your list as well. Produced by Zack Snyder, but not directed by, and that's Wonder Woman. Which
Yes.
all of the sequences with the warriors on Wonder Woman's home, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know these movies very well, Chad. I'll let you fill in the blanks there. But whatever that island thing is, and all the Amazon warriors like battling
Right.
it all really, even though it's not directed by Snyder, it has his fingerprints all over the way that
Right.
action is staged and the way that those sequences are choreographed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and if you think about Wonder Woman, also in this regard, it almost in many ways is the female version of 300, because 300 is a world where the males are born, they've got to meet a certain level
Sure,
to even
sure.
be accepted, and then from birth they are trained as warriors, as fighters. So they already have their destiny determined for them, that they're
Right.
going to fight. And very much that's Wonder Woman, that she from birth was a warrior trained to fight and to protect. So a lot of ways it's very much the female 300.
Yeah.
So I totally am. I That was one that I didn't write down. I wrote down DC in general because again, I don't think we get to where we are with any of the DC films, specifically without 300, and the what it did for not just the virtual studio but graphic novels in general, and and putting seriousness and fun together and making it adult oriented.
Right.
Those things are all a great influence on DC in the movies that it has made. And of course, I mean, he headed their movies for a while, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but I mean, DC and Zack Snyder, like they're so connected. Like there's no
Right.
pulling them apart. Even no matter how hard they try to, bring in other directors and
Right.
other voices, it's all tied to him in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, I got do I have one last one? Yeah, I got one last one to bring up. And this is another one of these, something inspired 300 and then 300 inspired a future
Right.
installment kind of thing. That's the most recent God of War video game, which
Mm.
they've gotten to the point now where there's kind of almost starting over, and it's just called God of War, the newest one. And now with like the technology of PlayStation 4, now PlayStation 5, they're making a sequel to this one. But they've gotten to the point where they can really up the storytelling aspect of it.
Right.
And now in the newest one, it's like a much more like personal story of the character Kratos and training his son. And so you get a lot of that real personal aspect of it, and a lot of it feels like the earlier scenes in 300 before we get to all the action where he's with his son and he's training him and he's like kind of giving him bits of wisdom and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's exactly where we find Kratos at this point in the new God of War games. And it's a change from the just nonstop action of the earlier games, but it definitely feels inspired by the way Leonidas and his son are interacting and passing on
Right.
that wisdom and all that.
No, like I said, the God of War video games. If I was going to play video games, I'd probably play that game.
Yeah,
But
for sure. I could
just
imagine that.
just the look of it. Again, I want them to do a movie, but do it better than the World of Warcraft, which could be a puzzle piece here. I didn't have it written down, but
yeah, let's aim for at least as good as Rampage. So do you have any others?
Yeah, I do. I'm gonna go with another favorite of mine. And funny how you were talking about the early ons of 300. The scenes prior to that though is what made me think of this one, and that's Alpha. Albert Hughes' movie,
Love that
2018 that we actually did an episode on.
Yes, we did.
I think I may have mentioned 300. I don't know if I did, but the early scenes with 300 where he has to go out into the wild and he is attacked and he has to kill with the stick the wolf or whatever. Reminded me a lot of Alpha.
Absolutely.
A few quick other ones I got here. I got John Carter. I've got Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
Sure.
These are both flops that I really like.
Yeah.
But
I'm with you on John Carter, not Valerian.
But they're very much like you're transported to these different worlds.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that. Whenever if it can take me to an alternative universe or to a different world, I'm sold.
Sure.
Samson, the 2018 film.
Oh yeah, you love that movie.
The biblical superhero.
That definitely works here.
I'm definitely a fan of anything that's involves swords. The last thing I was going to say is actually 300 had a big influence on Indian films. There are a number of Indian films that I've seen that it's funny because they caught on way later.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one was Bahubala, which was a two-part film. 2015, the first one came out, and that was actually an indie film, and they released it. I saw it in Vegas at the theater, and then the sequel in 2017 came out. And I saw it at the theater as well. I believe both of them are still on Netflix. They were for the longest time, but those films are very much 300 of everything's basically CGI, except for the people, and you've got these huge battles of thousands of people getting chopped up and everything.
Sure.
So it's a perfect piece here. There were some other ones though. I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but definitely I think in general was a big influence on Indian films.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, I haven't seen as many as you have. I've seen a couple, but whenever you see the trailers for those movies, they all feel very 300-ish.
Oh, I did have one more.
Okay.
And that was actually, and this is actually a big one because we didn't talk a lot about what this movie did with like cast and stuff, but this was a huge movie for Gerard Butler. I mean, it really put him on the map as far as being able to be a star. I mean, he'd done a lot of things before this. He was actually Dracula in the Dracula 2000 movie, and he was in I can't think of the other one, but he'd done some things, but this was the one where people were like really took notice, and of course now he's an action star. But also Lena Headey, she of course went on for Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones is another one of those that is an adult TV show, with swords, and it's not necessarily of the real strict and what am I trying to say here? It's exploitive. You got
Sure.
nudity, you got blood and guts, and it's not of, oh, this is highbrow art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just fun. It's dark. It's nasty. It's along the same lines. It's more grounded in reality than 300, but at the same time, it comes from that same feeling of just down and dirty.
Yeah.
Um, so
No, that's a great one to end it on because I think Game of
yeah,
Thrones definitely is heavily inspired by 300 and 300 like we've been saying through a lot of these pieces really brought back that kind of sand and sandals, swords, big warrior, epic kind of things. And I mean that has been Game of Thrones has been like the biggest
right,
really of the
right,
last
yeah,
15 years.
yeah.
So right on. Well, I'm not going to do a finished puzzle here just because we have a lot of things here, but we talked about a lot of stuff. And check out the show notes if you want to see the finished puzzle, everybody. But is there any major things about 300 that we didn't quite talk about while going through pieces here?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is something that really, really made me mad at the time of the Oscars. 300 was not nominated for special effects
Mm,
for an Oscar. It was when they first cut back the special effects awards to, it used to be like 100 people, I mean, 100 nominees for
right.
special effects. And then they cut it back to like four or something. The Golden Compass, the Golden Compass beat out 300 and Transformers.
It's
Okay, the
ridiculous.
first Transformers movie. Who has even seen the Golden Compass? I've never even seen it.
Mm,
It's like a Nicole Kidman movie, I think.
I
But
think I did see it
anyway,
for free, but it's not very good.
so were the special effects better than this,
N-
or the Transformers?
Not even close. Not even better than Transformers. No, but
Right.
definitely 300 should have had that.
I mean, to me, right there, that shows you that. Hey, come on, Oscars. I know. I was so mad. I was so mad. Not even a nominee. I mean, that killed me at the time. A couple of other things. One is, this was I mentioned how casting with Butler, Michael Fassbender. This was the first time that I had took notice of him.
Hmm.
I don't know how much he had done before that, but he is definitely one of my favorites. And he's doesn't have a huge part in this movie, but he's solid in it, and definitely he was the first time that I took notice.
It's funny that you brought him up because I didn't remember that he was in this, and because I hadn't seen it since the theater, and when I was rewatching it, I was like, "Oh my God, it's Michael Fassbender," and he is just awesome in this. Like,
Yeah,
what a
yeah,
he really kind of just blew up, a couple of years after this, and I think
right.
definitely thanks in part to this role.
The other thing was Larry Fong, cinematography. That guy is awesome.
Hmm.
And this is I don't know what happened. It used to be Snyder would do his movies with Fong and also Tyler Bates. That crew kind of broke up once he moved over to doing the DC. Of course, they may have their own specific people they want to do what, but Larry Fong's amazing. I always look forward to everything that he does.
Hmm.
The other thing I just wanted to say is, to me, this movie is probably in my top five of favorite all-time movies.
Hmm.
But I feel of the movies in my lifetime, this is definitely up there in the movies that were groundbreaking or revolutionary at the time that they came out.
Yeah.
My list, The Blair Witch Project is one of them.
Hmm.
Pulp Fiction,
Sure.
Star Wars, Superman, 300, and Do the Right Thing. That's my list of groundbreaking, revolutionary movies that changed cinema in some regard.
I think that's a
Um,
good list right there. Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Some people may not agree at all, but hey.
I think it's a pretty damn good list. It's and I do agree. I think it is absolutely groundbreaking. I mean, as we saw from a lot of these pieces, it was just hugely influential on the following decade that came, and still now.
Right. Yeah.
One other thought that I had, Xerxes, Rodrigo Santoro. We didn't bring him up at all, but I think that also we didn't have any pieces that we brought up, but like to have that like big flamboyant villain,
right.
I think that is something that has probably come up a lot in the movies following. It's such a great character.
Yeah, no, I would say Thanos
Sure.
definitely takes inspiration there.
I was going to say
from
maybe Thor Ragnarok, Kate Blanchett's character a little bit as well.
Right.
But no, that is such a great character. One last thing, and then we'll wrap it up. I never saw the sequel. Do you like the sequel?
Oh yeah, the sequel's great. It is.
Is it?
Snyder and his wife actually did produce the sequel. I believe Snyder co-wrote it. It's very much in line with this film, and yeah, it's great. It is. Yeah, I do recommend it for anybody that hasn't seen it.
Xerxes is the only one that's back, right? Like no other characters.
Yeah, I mean it's mostly it's the story that's going on at the same time that their battle's going on.
Right.
So yeah, it's mostly other characters. It's good as well. And here's the thing: is that supposedly after that one, Snyder was saying that he hopes that he was able to do other like historical movies. I don't know if he would direct himself or just kind of write and produce, but talking about things like George Washington and things like that, I think that would be amazing to have the 300 stylized world to redo like American history.
Sure.
I would so be excited for that because I do love historical films in general. An Alamo, I would be all on board in Alamo. Of course, they did remake the Alamo, and I liked it, but to do one that's more like stylized,
sure,
yeah, that'd be badass.
Right on. Well, Chad, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I would say The Doorman. I watched that the other night, the Ruby Rose movie.
Sure.
I really think Ruby Rose is underrated, underappreciated in what she can do. Of course, she was great as Batwoman in the series, and she's walked away from that for whatever reason. But I hope she gets to do more things like The Doorman and even bigger than that. The Doorman's kind of a throwback to 90s action. It takes place in this apartment complex that's being shut down over Easter weekend due to renovations. It's pretty much empty. These bad guys come in, and it's kind of Die Hard meets Home Alone meets The Professional. It's pretty great.
Speaking of The Doorman, I woke up this morning to a voicemail from my dad. He said, "Dave, I just want you to know The Doorman would have been a big money maker if it opened in theaters. Big action, and she's covered in freaking tattoos."
There you go.
Yeah,
so
it's got the Rich Rosen stamp of approval. So.
Yeah, no. Ruby Rose is great. I look forward to more like giving her a chance to do what she can do because she's a badass.
Nice, right on. Well, Chad, I am glad we did this one. This was fun, and as always, look forward to getting you back on the show.
Oh yeah, anytime.
You've heard others, but nothing could prepare you for the shameful stupidity that is the Jock and Nerd Podcast. Hear Imran.
So if you offend everyone at once, it's a wash. I've covered everybody.
Anthony.
Sorry, I was texting. Say that again?
and Rug Boy
Yeah, whenever there's a snowstorm, my slack hole tightens up.
as they talk over one another,
Just exactly
John
the same
Connor
as,
was the fucking Terminator.
We're talking over each other. It's fine.
Sorry.
swear,
I had boobies.
and ask you for money.
Just give us the money.
Witness the hubris as they claim to be the world's authority on comic book movies.
Who said?
Never said that. You've never said that.
Who cares? A jock said that.
Comic book, TV, movie reviews, news, and whatever they choose. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The Jock and Nerd Podcast.
It's campy, silly, goofy fun.
Seriously, people really listen to this.
Jock and Nerd.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about 300. And, it is almost time for the Snyder Cut. So, I don't know. I'm going to see. I might make myself rewatch Man of Steel and Batman v Superman leading up to it. I don't watch superhero movies at home. It's just not my thing. But so I never end up rewatching superhero movies pretty much, period. So I've definitely never seen either of those a second time. So that's a pretty huge undertaking for me, but I think I'm going to maybe try to do it so I could give that Snyder Cut thing the justice it deserves. Chad, what have you got me into? Anyway, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoy what we're doing here at Piecing It Together. If you do, you could subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And you can follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Don't forget to join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And Chad makes sure to bring up DC movies and Zack Snyder movies whenever he gets a chance. Also, we have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post advanced episodes of Piecing It Together, as well as bonus content, as well as content from some of the other podcasts that I'm involved with, like Awesome Movie Year, who just recently posted a special bonus episode of the film Purple Rain. It's a bonus episode from their 1984 season. So lots of great content over on the Patreon. It's produced by David Rosen because it combines all the stuff that is produced by me. So check out patreon.com/bydavidrosen if you really love the show and want to support it a little bit. We will do a lot more special bonus content if we get some more subscribers. So if you really like what we're doing, it is the way to get more of what we're doing. So let's close this thing out with a piece of music, and I should play something that's got a good war type feel to it, something to fit with 300. And I think I'm going to play this track called Journey, which is from my free album Like Ashes. Definitely has a little bit of that kind of vibe to it, so enjoy this track. It's called Journey. This album, Like Ashes, is free, by the way. It's not one of my main albums. It's one of my bonus track albums, which are exclusively on my Bandcamp profile, davidrosen.bandcamp.com. There are 3 free albums alongside my 6 main albums, and this is on one of those. So enjoy Journey, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together, more of these Missing Pieces episodes, maybe some more Breaking It Apart episodes, and a whole bunch of other great stuff coming up real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.